Hey, everybody. This is Mike Friedman, the social organizational psychologist and coach. Um, you might recognize a different background that I have today, and that's because I'm dog sitting for a friend on this very warm Saturday afternoon in New York. But I wanted to make today's episode about a really useful principle that I find in my coaching with folks, and that principle is what's known as the reasonable person standard. And this one actually comes from the field of law, and it was taught to me by an attorney that I know very well, and that attorney happens to be my father. And he taught me this one when I was like pretty young, when I was, I think, either like a tween or a teen, when I was like 12, 13, 14, 15, something like that. And what my dad said to me back then was that 85% of the law, and I don't know where he's getting 85% from, but probably doesn't matter. He said 85% of the law is written around this question of what would a reasonable person do in this situation? So if the behavior is outside of the bounds of what a reasonable person would do in that situation, then we ought to be pretty suspicious of it, especially if it's the kind of behavior that harms other people or harms property or something like that. And if it is within the bounds of what a reasonable person would do to respond to that situation, then there's probably a higher chance that it's legal. Obviously, first of all, I'm not a lawyer, so I'm not giving legal advice, and I just want to stipulate that. Nor can I say, even if I was an attorney, I would imagine I wouldn't be able to say that this principle decides every single law and decides whether every single possible conceivable behavior is legal or illegal. But I find that in my coaching, especially when people approach me with difficult interpersonal situations, I get a lot of people who have situations at work, either with their boss or with their team or their colleagues or their direct reports, and they're in this situation where there's some kind of a conflict, or there may be a conflict brewing, or they can't tell if there's a conflict and they're not sure how to respond. Uh, they're not sure whether their behavior, either their past behavior or what they're thinking about doing, is appropriate. I will often invoke the reasonable person standard, and I would say, can you imagine if you were removed from this situation, if you were detached from it, and you were just an observer to two people, let's say, in a conflict or in a dynamic like this, and you observed somebody else doing that, would you consider that person a reasonable person? Or can you imagine a reasonable person responding with that behavior? And if it would be hard to call that person reasonable when they commit that behavior, there's a good chance you should be suspicious of that. And if it feels like something that a reasonable person might very well do, then you may be within reason. So hopefully this was helpful.